The night air was unusually still, the kind of silence that presses against the ears and makes every small sound feel amplified. In the modest suburban town of Millbrook, most homes had their porch lights off by 10, windows shuttered against the creeping chill of early autumn. The streets were empty, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the faint hum of distant traffic. It was the kind of peacefulness that lulled residents into a false sense of security. But that night, something was different. Emma Carlton had been biking home from her part-time job at the local bookstore, her route familiar and usually safe. She enjoyed the quiet, the rhythmic turning of her pedals beneath the dim glow of street lamps. Yet, as she rounded the corner near Cedar Lane, a shadow darted past, quick, fluid, and almost too fast to catch in the corner of her eye. Her heart thudded hard, an instinctive chill crawling up her spine. She glanced behind her, but the street remained empty, the soft whir of her bicycle tires the only sound breaking the silence. Emma never made it home that night. By morning, the small town was buzzing with rumors. The local police confirmed a missing persons report had been filed, but details were scarce. Whispers floated through coffee shops and office break rooms. Strange sightings of a lone cyclist seen near the park after dark, a figure moving silently on two wheels, vanishing before anyone could approach. Sheriff Daniels, a seasoned officer with 3 decades in the force, stood outside the Carlton house, offering what comfort he could to Emma's family. His face was grim but practiced in calm reassurance. "We're doing everything we can," he told them. "If anyone sees or hears anything suspicious, they need to report it immediately." Yet, beneath the surface, an unsettling tension began to take root. For a town that prided itself on safety and neighborliness, the idea of a predator using the most mundane of tools, a bicycle, to terrorize was both baffling and terrifying. No one knew where to look, and that uncertainty bred fear. As the sun set on Millbrook, the streets emptied earlier than usual. Doors were locked tighter, and windows were checked twice. Children were kept indoors and conversations turned to hushed warnings. The shadow on 2 wheels had arrived, and with it, a darkness no one was prepared to face. The initial shock of Emma Carlton's disappearance rippled quickly through Millbrook, yet within weeks, the unsettling pattern became undeniable. Another teenager vanished, then another, all in neighborhoods where the faint silhouette of a lone cyclist had been reported after dark. The local news caught hold, dubbing the mystery the work of the bicycle killer, a chilling nickname that gripped the town's collective imagination. Parents, once confident in their children's safety, now double-checked locks and questioned every unusual sound. Schools implemented stricter curfews and partnered with local law enforcement to monitor bus routes and bike paths. Community meetings filled with anxious faces discussed rumors, theories, and the desperate hope that the next disappearance would not be theirs. The police were under pressure. Sheriff Daniels coordinated patrols focused on areas where witnesses claimed to have seen the mysterious cyclist, while detectives pored over witness statements and physical evidence. Yet, the killer remained elusive, his movements swift and calculated, always just beyond reach. The presence of the bicycle itself was perplexing. It provided the killer with unmatched mobility and stealth, blending into the quiet suburban nights where bicycles were a common sight. It allowed him to strike and vanish before anyone could react. Residents reported glimpses of a shadowy figure, his bike cutting silently through the darkness, a ghost on 2 wheels. Amid the growing fear, the town tried to hold on to normalcy. But with each new report, the veil of safety was torn thinner. The bicycle killer was no longer just a rumor whispered in dark corners. He was a looming threat that haunted the streets, the parks, and the dreams of Millbrook's residents. In the quiet corners of Millbrook, where neighbors rarely crossed paths, a man lived a life carefully veiled in routine and silence. Jonathan Blake was an unassuming figure known to a handful of locals as the solitary mechanic at the town's small bicycle repair shop. Few ever saw beyond his quiet demeanor and the grease-stained hands that told of long hours spent repairing and tuning. No one could have guessed the dark obsession that simmered beneath his calm exterior. To Jonathan, the bicycle was more than just a machine. It was an extension of himself, swift, silent, and untraceable. Years of isolation had carved into him a sense of control that the world outside never offered. His obsession with precision and planning allowed him to slip through the shadows unnoticed, orchestrating his movements with the cold efficiency of a predator who had studied every angle. His childhood had been a series of fractured memories, neglect, loneliness, and a family too distracted to notice the boy who preferred solitude over company. The bike had been his escape, his sanctuary, and later, his instrument. No one in Millbrook suspected that the man who fixed their bicycles was the one haunting their streets at night, turning a simple ride into a nightmare. Yet Jonathan was not careless. Every step was calculated. He knew the town's rhythms, the places where darkness lingered longest, and the faces that were most vulnerable. His mind mapped the routes he took, ensuring escape routes and blind spots were always within reach. It was this meticulous preparation that kept him ahead of the police, leaving behind nothing but fear and whispers. Behind the wheels, the man was both hunter and ghost, an enigma hiding in plain sight. Hope arrived in the form of two girls who had escaped the bicycle killer's grasp, their trembling voices stitching together the terrifying puzzle the town desperately needed to understand. Lisa and Megan, both barely 17, had survived close encounters that chilled even the most hardened officers. Their accounts peeled back the veil, revealing the cold precision and relentless cruelty behind the killer's method. Lisa recalled the night she'd been biking home through the park when the figure appeared, a shadowy man on a battered bicycle silently closing in from behind. His sudden presence had been surreal, like a nightmare materializing from the darkness. She remembered the way he circled, watching, waiting, his eyes sharp and calculating. When he struck, it was swift and violent, but something inside her flared, a desperate will to live. She fought, screamed, and fled into the tangled underbrush, her heart pounding in terror and relief. Megan's story was equally harrowing. She'd been walking home along a quiet street when the same figure emerged, this time stepping off his bike with unnerving calm. She described his movements, slow, deliberate, as if savoring the fear he provoked. But when she managed to break free, running through backyards and over fences, the man's chase faltered. That moment of hesitation had been her salvation. Their testimonies became the cornerstone of the investigation, providing crucial insight into the killer's behavior and method. Officers noted the consistency in their descriptions. A man skilled at blending into the night, using his bike as a weapon of both mobility and intimidation. The town's fear shifted from vague anxiety to a more focused dread. It was no longer just about who might disappear next, but about how close the killer could get without being seen, and what lengths he would go to keep his secrets hidden. In the shadow of these survivor stories, Millbrook held its breath, waiting for justice to break the silence. The days following the survivors' escapes saw a surge in police activity that transformed the sleepy streets of Millbrook into a tense battleground. Sheriff Daniels doubled the night patrols, stationing officers along the familiar routes where the killer had struck and the darkened paths where whispers of his presence lingered. Surveillance cameras were hastily installed on street corners and near popular bike trails, but the man on two wheels proved frustratingly elusive. A specialized task force formed, composed of detectives, forensic experts, and behavioral profilers brought in from the state. Their work was relentless, sifting through mountains of evidence and witness accounts, piecing together a fragmented picture of the killer. Psychological profiles painted a portrait of a deeply isolated man, meticulous in planning and driven by a need for control, who found empowerment in the silent power of his bicycle. Tensions in the community soared as frustration with the slow progress mounted. Town meetings grew heated. Neighbors questioned the police's methods and shared their fears openly. The media coverage was relentless, amplifying panic and speculation. Businesses reported fewer customers after dark, and parents refused to let children roam freely, even in broad daylight. Yet, amid the heightened scrutiny, the killer adapted. He shifted his routes, became more cautious, and began targeting less predictable locations. Each time officers closed in, he vanished like a ghost, leaving behind a trail of fear and unanswered questions. Still, the law enforcement team refused to relent. Utilizing undercover officers disguised as cyclists and night riders, stakeouts stretched late into the early hours. They analyzed patterns of disappearance, mapped local bike shops and rental places, searching for any connection to the killer's movements. The hunt was becoming a game of shadows and strategy, the town's safety hanging precariously on the outcome. Despite the surge in police efforts, cracks began to show in the investigation's foundation. The pressure to solve the case was immense, but leads often dissolved into dead ends. False sightings and mistaken identities cluttered reports, draining resources and morale. The task force found itself chasing shadows, uncertain if the bicycle killer was growing bolder or simply more cunning. Internal tensions flared. Detectives argued over suspect profiles and priorities, while some officers questioned the reliance on witness testimony that sometimes conflicted or shifted under scrutiny. The community's faith in law enforcement wavered as weeks dragged into months with no arrests, no resolution. Meanwhile, Jonathan Blake maintained his outward facade, blending seamlessly into daily life. He observed the escalating chaos with cold detachment, adjusting his patterns in response to the increased patrols. His mechanical mind calculated risk and reward, always staying one step ahead. No slip, no mistake. The killer's survival depended on it. But beneath that cold exterior, subtle signs of strain began to emerge. Small habits changed. A bike left unlocked for a moment too long. A glance over the shoulder a little too quick. As the investigation tightened, cracks in his armor began to form. Unbeknownst to Jonathan, the breakthrough was closer than anyone imagined. A single overlooked detail, a scrap of evidence dismissed too quickly, held the key to unraveling the deadly cycle of terror gripping Millbrook. It began with a faint thread, an overlooked detail buried in the mountain of reports and witness statements. Detective Harper, a sharp-eyed investigator with a knack for seeing what others missed, found it while reviewing surveillance footage from a local convenience store near the latest disappearance. The footage was grainy, almost indistinguishable, but there it was, the fleeting shadow of a man on a bicycle, his frame familiar from survivor descriptions, but more importantly, something peculiar about his movements, a distinctive limp in his left leg. Hopper cross-referenced the limp with medical records and local registries, narrowing down potential suspects. Jonathan Blake's name rose quickly to the surface, a recent injury documented at the clinic, minor but enough to affect his ride. Further digging revealed Jonathan's increasing absences during the nights the disappearances occurred. His alibi, previously accepted without question, now wavered under scrutiny. The task force moved swiftly but cautiously. Surveillance was intensified around Blake's bike shop and home. Undercover officers shadowed his daily routines, seeking the moment to strike without alerting him. Blake's carefully constructed world began to unravel, the pressure mounting as the net closed. Meanwhile, the community's hope surged. The bicycle killer might finally be within reach. Yet the danger grew as the killer, sensing the walls closing in, became more unpredictable, more desperate. The coming days would be a race against time to stop a man who had eluded capture for far too long. The night air in Millbrook was thick with tension, the quiet streets holding their breath as the manhunt reached its climax. Jonathan Blake, sensing the tightening noose, moved with heightened caution, his usual precision tinged with a new edge of desperation. The solitary mechanic, once calm and methodical, was now a man cornered by the very shadows he had once commanded. Undercover officers trailed Blake for days, piecing together his routines, waiting for the moment when the trap could be sprung without endangering innocent lives. That moment came on a chilly autumn evening when Blake took his bike and slipped into the familiar maze of bike trails on the outskirts of town. Patrol cars quietly blocked escape routes, and officers concealed themselves behind trees and bushes. The silence was broken only by the soft crunch of tires against gravel and the distant rustle of leaves. Blake's figure moved steadily, unaware that this ride would be his last. Suddenly, as he slowed near a dimly lit alley, officers emerged, flashing badges and commands. Blake's eyes flashed with a mixture of defiance and resignation. A tense struggle ensued, brief but intense, before the man was subdued and cuffed. The bicycle, his silent accomplice, was seized as evidence. As the news spread, relief washed over Millbrook like a long-awaited rain. The nightmare that had gripped the town for months was over. The bicycle killer was no more. The arrest of Jonathan Blake marked the end of a dark chapter for Millbrook, but the echoes of fear and loss lingered long after the headlines faded. The town grappled with the aftermath of the terror that had unfolded on its quiet streets, families mourning, survivors healing, and a community seeking answers to questions that refused to be silenced. In the days following the capture, investigators painstakingly pieced together the extent of Blake's crimes. His home and workshop revealed chilling evidence, detailed maps of escape routes, notes on victims' routines, and a meticulous journal that laid bare the mind of a man consumed by control and darkness. Forensic analysis confirmed his guilt beyond doubt, but the true horror lay in the cold detachment with which he chronicled his acts. Counseling services were set up for survivors and families, while the town held vigils to honor those lost and to reclaim a sense of safety. The local police force faced scrutiny but also gratitude for their relentless pursuit of justice. Yet beneath the surface, the question lingered. How had a monster ridden unnoticed through their lives for so long? For Millbrook, the bicycle killer was a stark reminder of the shadows lurking in plain sight and the fragile line between normalcy and nightmare. In the months that followed, Millbrook slowly began to stitch itself back together, a community determined not to be defined by the horrors that had unfolded. Streets once abandoned at dusk now echoed with laughter and conversation. Bike paths, once avoided in fear, saw families and friends reclaiming the trails with cautious hope. The local government launched initiatives focused on community safety, improved lighting in public spaces, neighborhood watch programs, and open forums encouraging dialogue and vigilance. Mental health resources expanded, offering support not only to survivors but to anyone grappling with the trauma left in the wake of the bicycle killer's reign. Among the residents, a collective resilience blossomed. Stories of courage, survival, and solidarity spread quietly, helping to heal invisible wounds. Survivors like Lisa and Megan became advocates, sharing their experiences to raise awareness and empower others. Though the scars remained, Millbrook refused to be shackled by fear. The memory of the bicycle killer became a solemn chapter in their history, a warning and a testament to the strength found in community and hope. As life regained its rhythm, the town moved forward with cautious optimism, a little wiser, a little stronger, forever changed, but unbroken.